the last talk. Yeah, give it up. Come on, huge. Woo! But it's not the last thing. So after the last talk, stay in your seats and we'll do the closing ceremony. And you have come to the end of your journey. You've flown on an eagle and a dragon, fallen from your fair share of heights, shared a drink with a spy, an advertising genius, and a lost soul. You've been captured, released, eaten alive, and narrowly escaped. You soared heights and tunneled depths. And yet, somehow it feels like you never even left your seat. You reflect back on all the things you've learned, and you wonder what tomorrow's adventure is going to be. Even though you're tired, part of you can't wait. You pause for just a moment. And then you smile. And you feel so coated. And you realize that you're in a new place. It's a garden. The Garden of Anthony Eden.
All right, thanks, Paul. All right. Awesome. So, honestly, give it up for the organizers of this conference because they have put on a hell of a show for us. Thank you to all the organizers. Everybody, round of applause for them, please. They really deserve it. So when I was thinking about what I was going to give as a talk here, I said, so coded, I'm going to talk about Erlang and design, and it's going to be super deep tech. And then I was told I'm in the last slot, and I looked at what Paul talked about at his last slot and in one of the previous So Codeds, and I said, oh, maybe I won't do Erlang. Maybe I'll do something a little different. Maybe I'll do something, I don't know, a little more introspective, a little bit of a study on oneself. And so I decided to create this talk to see if I could learn a little bit more about myself, and in this journey, hopefully help you and give you some tools so you can learn a little bit more about yourself. This talk is entitled Why? And the question is, as a developer, why do I build stuff? I mean, why? What's driving me to do this? As somebody who goes out and talks at conferences, why do I have the urge to teach people? What's that about? Why do I even want to be present? Why do I even do anything? What is the meaning of existence? Heady questions, for sure. And so I started doing a little bit of research about what drives people to do what they do. And there's a lot of research out there to do this. A lot of it talks about motivation, which is essentially a theoretical construct used to explain behavior. And the more I researched, there were things I'd heard of before, such as the hierarchy of needs and things like that. Everything is really based on these two ideas. You have extrinsic factors. So these are things that are outside sources that force you. Outcomes from this can be positive or negative. It's basically you're performing an activity specifically for the outcome. All right. Typically, extrinsic factors include rewards, such as money or grades. They also might include the threat of punishment. So you have positive and negative reinforcement. And there's a lot of study on extrinsic factors, but that wasn't really what was interesting to me. Really, what I wanted to look into is the intrinsic factors. Right? These are the things that drive us internally to make us do what we want to do, the things that make us choose our choices in life. So typically, intrinsic factors are things that come from inside. You might be stimulated by challenges. You might want to improve your capacity and gain knowledge. Right? These are all intrinsic factors. And I started doing a little bit more research, and actually I found a book that was quite interesting. It was published in 2000. I don't know if any of you know this, but it was published in 2000 by Dr. Stephen Rice. He's a professor at Ohio State University College of Medicine, and says, who am I? Well, it seems about right. That's the question I'm asking. What is it that's driving me? And I started reading through this book, and I said, oh, this is really interesting. They did scientific research that combines psychology and philosophy to create sort of a framework from within which we can judge what our basic desires are, right? In this study, they took over 6,000 people across all diverse stations of life. They developed a comprehensive list of goals, and they whittled that down from the initial 400, they deduped them, and then they ended up with 328 goals. And then they took those, and they gave them to over 400 adolescents and adults in various locations, and they said, you know, basically, rate how much you like or dislike this goal. And from then, they started sampling from different locations. They finally whittled it down to about 20 goals, and they used factor analysis to discover the root meanings. They started at 10 and worked up to 11, and all the way up to 20 of these goals. And they found that somewhere right in the middle, around 16 basic desires, represented all of the things at the core which drive our decision-making processes, all right? Now, it's also interesting because these 16 desires vary from person to person. And in fact, these desires together can be used to actually create a profile of who we are and what drives us. Interestingly enough, they state in this book that these desires are primarily genetic. All right, so you inherit these desires from your genetic line, but they can also be influenced by social factors. They can be influenced by upbringing. They don't necessarily, you don't get one that you didn't have from genetics, but it can raise or lower any of the desires through your education, through your family. So it's interesting, right? To me, at least, it was. Because when you're getting old like I am, I'm actually turning 40 in 2 years. I'm going to turn 39 this year, turn 40, and I really am starting to question a lot of the decisions I've made in life and trying to figure out who I am. And so this was a good opportunity to do a little bit of a study. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually go through the 16 basic desires and tell you each one, and then we'll go from there and see what happens. So the first desire is power, right? Everybody experiences the desire of power from less or more in some form or another. It's the desire for mastery. It represents confidence. It's often represented by achievements, so getting awards, things like that, and leadership. All right? A lot of people that are in strong leadership positions have a strong desire for power. The next one is independence. All right? This is the desire for self-reliance. People that really strongly believe and desire independence want freedom. And the opposite is interdependence. These are people that rely on others, that enjoy being with others and depending on others to give them strength. The third one is curiosity. This is desire for knowledge. This is pretty powerful. I think a lot of you probably have this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here at a conference, spending your time here, learning about all these diverse topics. But we'll see a little bit more later. Usually, this desire, curiosity, is about exploration. It's actually about enjoying the process of learning, not the destination. It's not about achievements like power and grades. It's more about enjoying learning. All right? And it's also not intelligence. It's not your capacity to learn. It's how much you enjoy learning. The next one is acceptance. This is your desire for inclusion. Usually people that have a heavy desire for acceptance have trouble receiving criticism. They try to avoid rejection. They're anxious in social situations. The opposite, of course, is somebody that doesn't care about getting acceptance from other people around them. Order is the next one. This is your desire for organization. It's rules, it's scheduling, it's lists, it's cleanliness. And as I'm going through these, what's interesting is that all of these can actually be observed in animals as well, in some form or another. All right? Cleanliness in animals, it's represented by animals that clean themselves. All right? So the point is that this is not just human behavior. It seems to be applicable to all kinds of animals. Saving is the next one. This is the desire to collect things. Often people that really value saving save money. They hoard items of interest. They're often very frugal. So they'll actually do it to the point where they'll take away certain things that they don't necessarily need in life, down to the point of where they have almost nothing. And that actually makes them happy. The opposite side, of course, is somebody that loves to spend. This is the person who doesn't care about saving at all. You have honor. So this is the desire to be loyal to one's parents, to one's heritage, to one's country. It involves things like patriotism. It involves religion, duty, things like this. After that, we have idealism. This is the desire for social justice. This is the belief that you can make the world a better place, and making it a better place is by making it a more just place. People who believe in this often volunteer quite regularly. They give to charity. They work to improve their community. They value fairness. The next is social contact. This is the desire for companionship. This is the kind of person that searches out friends. They build lots of strong friendships. They seek out others, and they're often fun-loving. They're the life of the party. And the opposite of them are the people that don't really like that. They prefer more to be alone and to spend time with themselves and in their thoughts. And an important note here is that none of these factors are necessarily 100% one way or 100% other. We all find ourselves in the middle often, and in fact shifting around. And if you go too much in one direction, you actually start to feel an unbalance, especially if you're near the middle normally, and then you might have to counterbalance that. So for example, you might like to go out and party a bit, but maybe there's a point where it gets to be too much and you just need some alone time. Family is another one of the desires. This is the desire to raise one's own children. This is different than nurturing. Nurturing is not listed as one of the basic desires. This is specifically you have a desire to have children and to raise those children. And often it's shown through sacrifices that we make for our children. Status is the next one. This is a desire for social standing. It includes prestige and attention and wealth. Often it's represented by celebrities and royalty. Vengeance. Vengeance is the desire to get even. This is actually a very common desire. We have it at different levels. Some point where it's extreme, and this vengeance drives people to do things where they hurt others. It includes aggressiveness, but it also includes competition. The idea of competition is one where you're trying to win, and you're trying so hard that that's what you drive for. Romance, the desire for sex and beauty. This is another one of those driving factors. This is not the animalistic form of sex where we're trying to reproduce so that we can spread our genetics. It's more of actually beauty is a big, strong piece of it, part of it. Eating. So eating is, of course, the desire to consume food. And what's interesting is eating is one of the few biological needs that also has psychological significance. All right? When you go out and you eat with a group, that desire to get together by the group and have a big meal, whether it's family or friends or what have you, or the desire to diet, because you feel like that your eating habits are causing you to be less of a person than what you want to be. So we have two more. Physical activity, that's the desire to exercise muscles. Usually people that like this, they prefer physically demanding work. They're typically athletes. But it's not necessarily dependent on ability. You don't have to be a good athlete to enjoy physical activity. You just have to enjoy the activity itself. And then finally is tranquility. Tranquility is a desire for emotional calm. Typically people that like tranquility search for stress-free environments. And when they're not in those environments, they get anxious. They often have a low tolerance for pain. And they get panic attacks. So those are the 16 basic desires. If you're interested, and you have your computer open in front of you or a pen and paper, get that out now. Let's do this. All right? I'm going to give you the questions, the basic questions, that can actually give you your desire profile. All right? So if you're interested in doing this, if not, I understand. It's actually, normally if you're going to do the full test, which has like some 500 questions, you'd want to execute this by a professional who has expertise to score and interpret it. However, these general questions give us an interesting personal profile as a starting point. Now, in my case, I've already done this, and I'm going to tell you the results today while I'm here on stage. They probably won't surprise you, those of you who know me. But in order to protect from the likelihood of just outright lying, I also had my wife do this, and we compared our scores, all right, for me. We actually did hers too, but I'm not telling you those. So the other thing is, if you're afraid to do this, it's interesting to ask yourself why. You know, I'm okay with it, but if you want to do it, it's fun anyways. All right, so as I'm going through this, if you want to follow along, I'm going to make statements, and you're going to mark V for very important, A for average importance, or L for less importance. And this is what it means to you. This is you're basically self-analyzing. All right? So the first one we're going to talk about is power. So mark very important, if you're interested, if you are highly ambitious compared to other people your age. If you usually seek leadership roles. And if you usually dominate in social situations with other people your age. For any of those, if you answer yes to any of those, put a V next to power. Mark an L if you're noticeably less ambitious than people your own age, or generally if you prefer to be submissive in social situations. And if none of those apply, or if both apply, then write an A, because that means you're average. You have both sides of this. Sometimes you might like to be submissive in social situations, sometimes you might like to have the leadership role. Moving on to independence. Mark very important if you usually resist advice and guidance from others. And self-reliance is essential to your happiness. So if self-reliance is essential to your happiness, or if you resist advice and guidance from others, put a V. Mark an L if you compared to people your own age, you're noticeably more devoted to your spouse or partner, or you dislike being on your own. And then again, same thing, I'm going to keep saying, if you marked in both of those, if you answered true to both statements in both sections, or if you didn't answer any at all, you're average, so mark an A. Keep going here. Curiosity, mark very important if you have a thirst for knowledge. If compared to your peers, you ask a lot of questions, and if you think a lot about truth. On the other hand, put an L if you dislike intellectual activities, or if you rarely ask questions. Mark an A, of course, if you either put it in both columns or both answered both types of questions, or none. Next, for acceptance, mark very important if you set easy goals for yourself, or if you're a quitter, or if you have great difficulty coping with criticism. It's okay to say that's true. All right? Because you're not going to share this with anybody. And even if you were, that's just who you are. And that's part of what we have to learn from this. Mark an L if you have a lot of self-confidence, or if you handle criticism noticeably better than most people. That is, you don't become unduly upset. Mark an average if you have both or none. Order. Mark important if you are more organized than most people, you enjoy cleaning up, or you like creating rules and following them religiously. Mark less important if your office or workspace is usually a mess, or you hate planning. Saving. All right, if you're a collector or you're a miser, which means basically you're reluctant to spend, even sometimes forgoing basic comforts just so you can hoard money, or you're noticeably tighter with your money than most people that you know, then mark a V for very important. Mark an L for less important if you're a free spender or you rarely save anything at all. And mark average if you have both or none. Next section, mark very important if you are known as a principled, a highly principled person, or you're known as a very loyal person. Or mark L if you believe that everyone is out for him or herself, or you do not care that much about morality. Idealism. Mark very important if you make personal sacrifices for a social or humanitarian cause. You have repeatedly volunteered time to community service organizations, or you have repeatedly made generous contributions to the needy. Mark L if you pay little attention to what's going on in society around you, and you do not believe in charity, or you do not believe in charity. And again, mark an A if you believe both or none of these. Social contact. Mark V if you feel the need to be around other people a lot to be happy, or you are known as a fun-loving person. Mark L if you're a private person, if you kind of hate parties, and you don't really care much for other people except for your family and a few close friends. Again, mark A if you have both or none. Mark very important if raising children is essential to your happiness, or compared with other parents you know, you spend much more time with your children. Mark less important if you feel being a parent is kind of a burden, or if you've ever abandoned a child. Hey, it happens. I'm just saying. Part of this is to learn. It sounds funny, but we're trying to learn a little bit ourselves. So for status, mark very important if you almost always want to buy only the best or most expensive things. If you often buy things to impress other people, or you spend a great deal of time trying to join or maintain membership in prestigious clubs or organizations. But mark an L if you usually don't care what people think of you, you're less impressed by wealth than the people that you know, and you're not really impressed by upper class status or royalty. So that's an L. Again, if you have it in both or none, you can write an A. Vengeance. So mark very important if you have trouble controlling your anger, if you're aggressive, if you love to compete, or if you spend a lot of time seeking revenge. Mark less important if you're slow to feel anger compared to most people, you look the other way if somebody insults you or they offend you, and you dislike competitive situations. An A if you have both or none. Romance. Mark very important if you spend an unusual amount of your time compared with people you know about your same age in the pursuit of romance. If you have a long history of sex with many partners, all right? If you have trouble controlling your sexual urges, or if compared to most people you know, you spend much more time appreciating beauty, artwork, nature, things like that. Mark less important if you spend little or no time thinking about sex, or if you think sex is disgusting. Eating. So we're almost done here, and then you get to find out how I scored. So for eating, mark very important if you spend an unusual amount of time compared to other people you know who are about the same age as you eating, or if you spend an unusual amount of time compared to people your age dieting. Mark less important if you've never had a weight problem or you rarely eat more than you should. And mark average if you have both or none. Physical activity, mark very important, so V if you've exercised regularly all your life, or if sport is an important part of your life. Mark L if you have a history of being physically lazy, or you have a mostly sedentary lifestyle. And mark A if you have in both or none. And finally, for tranquility, mark V if two of any of these following are true. It scares you when you feel shaky when you're trembling, or when your heart beats rapidly, or if when your heart is beating rapidly, you start to worry that you might have a heart attack, or as silly as it sounds, if it embarrasses you when your stomach growls. Also mark a V if you have a history of recurring panic attacks, or you generally are fearful and timid. On the other hand, mark an L if you're a brave person, or if you have noticeably fewer fears than your peers. Mark average if you have both. So this is the short version of the test, right? And I did this short version for myself. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what I discovered about myself. And again, those of you who know me are probably going to be nodding their head in about 1 second here, all right? These are the things that I found are very important to me, all right? And what's interesting is my wife and I had very similar answers on this. So I'm fairly confident in these. To me, power, so that is the search to, the desire to influence others and to make achievements. Curiosity, so the desire to learn. And status, the desire for wealth and prestige. These are the things that are driving factors. The only thing that she did different was under status, she gave me an average rating, where I thought it was very important. On the other hand, these were least important for me: independence, acceptance, and saving. So I was actually kind of surprised about independence, because I thought I was a fairly independent person, but upon reflection, it's actually pretty accurate. I depend on people around me to give me support. I depend on my wife and my family. Acceptance, yeah, I've never really cared much what people think about what I say or do. And again, people who know me are probably nodding right now, going, yep, that's about right. And saving, yeah, I like to spend money. I've always enjoyed spending money. The remaining were average. So basically what that means when they're average is that you'll spend time going back and forth between a little bit more and a little bit less. Sometimes, for example, I might want to do sport a little bit more because I'm feeling like I need to get out there and exercise, and then other times I don't really care. So yeah, so did we get it right? And for me personally, I feel that it worked out pretty well, and let me explain why. So for example, power. I run my own company where I'm the decision maker, all right? I've set up this situation. I'm often the first one to go into a leadership position in different work environments or athletic environments, things like that. I've been a software developer for 20 years now, and I have a bunch of different programming languages under my belt. I speak a couple different languages, so French and English. I'm a musician, I read, I like scholarly articles. I created this presentation because I wanted to know better what kind of a person I am. So yeah, curiosity fits. And then status, its status comes from everything you can see from how I am, from the clothes that I choose to the expensive shoes. All of this is a desire to show my status, all right? And I've spent a lot of money on things like wine, where I don't even really have that good of a nose or a sense of taste, but I'll spend the money anyways. And again, this is me being driven by my desire for status. All right. And like the previous person, the timer just is sort of at 30. So if I go over, just wave and go, get off. All right, so now that I know this about myself, the question is, how can I apply this? And the same question goes for you. Once you understand what the basic driving factors are in your life, how do you apply that? Well, the first and most obvious is your own personal growth. That's kind of what I was looking for. It's like now that you know what things are driving you, you can actually go and try to become encourage those things. So for example, if curiosity is something that's driving me, and then if I stop learning for a while, I feel bad as a person. I feel like I'm wasting my life. And so for me, it's important to go back and maybe learn something new. Professional satisfaction, same thing. Basically, if you're in a job that doesn't match your profile, so for example, if you're the type of person who loves sports and you love being independent, and then you're in a job where you have to be a leader in front of a team, that might not be best for you. Or if you like curiosity and you're independent, and you're not searching for power or things like that, again, maybe you need to look for something specific to help you enjoy life better. I also think we can use this in our relationships with other people. So once you start to think of how you behave and compare that to other people, some interesting things start to happen. We start to understand ineffective communication and this notion of not getting the other person. So just to be clear, ineffective communication has a couple different things. Basically, misunderstanding is the first. Misunderstanding is often when you don't have enough information. All right, so for example, let's say you have a friend who comes over and that friend is kind of in a pissy mood and they get mad at you and then you're like, what the hell did I do? Well, in fact, it might not be you. You might be missing a bit of information about how something bad happened to them at work that day. All right, so that's one type. But the other one is actually deeper. This is where your profiles are so different that you cannot understand each other. All right, you're just not going to get each other. So this starts with the misunderstanding. So you have views that are vastly different. And then it leads into this thing, which is a weird term called self-hugging, which is basically somebody saying, my way is the best way, all right? That's all there is. And that misses out on individuality, the fact that each person is different. But we do this all the time, all right? And then the final one is everyday tyranny. And this is where you've come to the conclusion that your way is the best way, all right? My way of going up and speaking at conferences is the best way, and the fact that you guys aren't up here doing it means there's something wrong with you. And now I'm going to try to convince you by coming and telling you should go talk at conferences because it'll make you a better person, all right? But the fact of the matter is I'm not considering the fact that you're an individual and maybe you just don't like talking at conferences, all right? And that's okay. So often people who use things like intimidation, criticism, guilt, incentives and punishment, they try to change the behavior of others using everyday tyranny. And these are the types of things that once we recognize that exists, and we look back on some of those, maybe those fights we've had in the past with other people, we go, oh, now that I understand what we were talking about and the fact that our viewpoints were so different, okay, maybe that makes a lot of sense. How are we doing on time? Sweet, I'm almost done anyways. All right. So what does this mean for me? By understanding the most basic desires that I have, I can find goals that I can achieve that will help satisfy those desires and overall will make me a happier person, okay? Instead of fighting against them. But more importantly, I can attempt to better understand those basic desires and how they affect my perception of the people around me. And you start to catch yourself that my desire, and I might be talking to somebody, and one of my desires is coming through, and I'm not hearing them, and I'm not understanding that, in fact, that person just has a very different viewpoint. So it actually creates a good environment for gaining further empathy and understanding the people around you. Finally, I know what it means for me now, and for those of you who did the test or who want to do the test later, the question is what it means for you. So as we wrap up the conference, and you go back to your home and your work, think about these questions. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Put these in your head, ruminate a bit, and see where you get with them. So the first question is, for those of you who were not willing to do the test on yourself, why not? Are you afraid to find out something? Do you think it's a waste of your time? I don't have your answers. Those answers have to come from you. But those are the questions I want to ask. You should ask yourself. For those of you who did perform the self-analysis, did anything surprise you? And finally, is there anything from this that you just did that you're going to use to influence your future actions, to make yourself happier and to create a happier place for those around you and the people you care about? Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again for setting up this conference. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to have some more things going on here. My name is Anthony Eden. I'll be happy to talk to you about Erlang afterwards if you want. I will explain to you everything I know about it if you really like it. Otherwise, please have a safe trip back home, and thanks again.